Mamelodi police officials who turned away a family trying to report their missing child are facing suspension. The number of kidnappings and murders of children has increased over the past weeks, and families have expressed their anger over the alleged slow response of police officials asking them to return after 48 hours. According to the South African Police Service website, there is no waiting period to report a missing person. To discuss this further, joining us from our Durban Studios, we've got Dumisile Nala, who is the National Executive Officer at Childline South Africa. Dumisile, thank you. Thanks very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Leanne. Good morning to you and good morning to the listeners.
I mean, I'm going to be as bold as to say that the police's slow response and the fact that they actually told parents to leave and come back in 48 hours is a crime in itself, is it not?
It is really of great concern because we know that there is no waiting period.
Dumisile, we
definitely
Continue.
know that there is no waiting period when it comes to matters of missing people and children, for that matter.
Yeah.
And it's really, when you look at it, the first few hours are the most important hours in terms of gathering evidence and finding some sort of clues in terms of what has happened to that child. So the fact that families are made to wait or are turned away is really quite distressing.
Yeah. You know, my worry is that I sit here every single morning and seem to be reading the cases of children disappearing more and more often. And this, for me, is of great concern because when there's a story of a family that's going to report and then they are turned away, what does this tell you about the policing system and the protection of children? I mean, surely someone's dropping the ball somewhere if these cases are increasing.
Leanne, exactly, I agree with you. And we are even moving towards observing the Child Protection Week. But what we see are cases of children being reported on a daily basis. We see brutal murders of children in our country. And we know that it takes all the systems to work together to protect children. We emphasize all the time that parents, communities, government, and other professionals have to do their part to ensure that children are safe. But also systems are made out of different parts, and if one part doesn't play its part, and as we are looking at it right now in terms of what is happening within the police service, that really crumbles and puts a dent to the whole child protection system, and that leaves our children who are quite vulnerable, very open to abuse and any other horrific crimes that can happen to them out there.
Yeah. Dumisile, in terms of the success rate of prosecutions in cases of missing children, what does it look like in South Africa? Obviously, this would be a generalized answer, but from Childline's perspective, how does it look?
Leanne, when we look at cases of children, and we would of course look at missing children, but in our perspective we also work with children who have been abused and children who have been found dead. The conviction rate is very low. And it's, as you are saying, it's more of a generalized perspective because it's also very difficult to understand what happens from when the case is reported. What happens to all the cases that are reported to a situation where cases go for prosecution and then we get a conviction. So it's also very difficult to pull the thread through all those processes to be able to make a very clear determination as to what is the rate at the end of the day. But we hear and families and communities contact us where they find themselves in a situation where they reported and nothing happens, or they find people whom they thought were in prison are already out. So it's really a very big crisis, and we talk of the most vulnerable in our society.
Absolutely. I mean, our job as a society is to protect our children, and not only our children, all children, and we're not doing this right now, and that is something to make us angry. So I'm just going to turn the question around now, because we're talking from the perspective of being angry and as those that are reporting and not seeing anything. But let me ask the question, what are the police lacking? Perhaps there's something we're not asking. What are the challenges that the police are facing? What can our new minister, Becky Cele, perhaps do to improve the police and the way they handle these things, so that perhaps we can see cases coming down?
Well, Leanne, without really probably stepping into a different sphere, because I would like to believe that the minister has people who advise him on specific matters. But what we think needs to happen is the police, they require training, a lot of training in terms of the difficult cases that are brought to them. And of course, we hear that training is taking place. One, however, needs to look at the nature of training and how that training is conducted. It's very important that we look at a multidisciplinary or intersectorial training that has to take place, because in that space, not only do you get to understand what is your role and your responsibility as a police or a social worker, but you also get to understand what are your other colleagues in the space of child protection need to do in order to ensure that children are safe. And that has to happen at grassroots level. When communities are facing problems, they go to their local police station.
Yeah.
And we need to really understand what happens at that local police station. But also, most importantly, we need to empower our communities so that when they go there, they know what are their rights and they can claim those, and know that when you're turned away, it is not the right thing. And of course, at that time, they are under a lot of distress and confusion. So we would want to believe that appropriate training must take place. Intersectorial interaction is very important so that we support each other and we learn from each other as well.
All right, Dumisile, we have to leave it there, but I do thank you for your time and the work that Childline South Africa does. Dumisile Nala is the National Executive Officer at Childline South Africa. I can only imagine the desperation that any parent must go through with a missing child. I mean, if I turn around for 1 minute and don't see, 1 second and don't see my child next to me, I feel helpless. So who do you turn to? You turn to the police. And if they turn you away, what do you do? And that is the question we need to ask. All right, let us take a break. We do have a positive story for you this morning, though.